RC from the Mountaintop Joiner Shop here. A while back I posted a video about dowel joinery in general and the DowelMax jig specifically, and it was quite well received. Later on I received an email from the fine gentlemen at DowelMax themselves, and they told me that they really liked it. They liked it so much that they suggested sending me a new version of the DowelMax jig. See, it turns out that the one I demonstrated in that video was quite antiquated. I bought it in like 2012 or 2013 or something. So they have since made many improvements to that jig. They've also made all kinds of attachments that make it even more versatile in use, and they agreed to send it to me. I have it right here under my bench. So in this video I'm going to be showing you that jig and how it's different from the previous model, and I'm at a point in the project that I'm working on that I think the DowelMax might be the best tool for the job. So albeit in limited fashion, I'm going to be demonstrating it in use as well. So if you're at all curious about any of that, stick around. By the way, while DowelMax did send me this jig free of charge, they did so with no strings attached, like whatsoever. So anything I say about the jig in this video is my opinion and my opinion only. That said, I did sign up for their affiliate program, so if you look in the description for this video, there is a link there where you can go and purchase any of the DowelMax stuff. And if you do that, a small percentage of the purchase price goes towards supporting this channel, which I very much appreciate. So if you're going to be doing that, thank you in advance. I appreciate the support. Okay, so this is my organizer that I keep all of my dowel joinery related stuff in. There's things like my Lee Valley dowel former here. It has various inserts of different sizes for actually making dowels. And over here I have some dowel locating spikes, which I almost never use. And everything else in here is DowelMax related stuff. So if you were to order the whole kit and caboodle from these guys, these are the components that you're likely to end up with. The most common configuration that I use is this one here. This is with the 3/8 inch drill guides in it, and on one side I have a fence, and on the other side I have kind of the clamps, the kind of thread-on clamps here. That is designed to be used with your most typical stock thicknesses, like a 3/4 inch or inch thick stock. So that's the one I usually have set up and ready to go. But of course you can take this fence and this clamping area off of here and move it to different drill blocks. So I have a different drill block here that has different inserts in it. This one is a 1/4 inch. So you might use this for like 1/2 inch stock. And of course these are threaded, so you can take these inserts out, move them from block to block, but if you have the whole joinery system, you're going to end up with extra blocks, which is great, because then you don't have to unthread all these and move them over to the other block. So that's the 1/4 inch. They've also since come out with a 5/16 inch right here. Over here I have the big honkin' overbuilt ginormous 1/2 inch dowel block here. It's huge. I'm not sure what I would use this for, but I'm sure someday something will come up. And then one thing that was recommended to me by people who have this jig and saw my previous video is that I have 2 drill bits for each of these sizes. So when you're doing dowel joinery that is a drill depth, that's one drill depth on one side of the joint and a different drill depth on the other, you can set 2 drill bits up with their stop collars at the appropriate lengths, and then all you have to do is switch drill bits really quick instead of having to kind of measure and fiddle with it so much. So with the kit I ended up with 2 1/4 inch drill bits, 2 5/16, 2 3/8. The only one I don't have 2 of is the big 1/2 inch drill there. Also included are things like your referencing pins. This referencing pin you can stick into a previously drilled hole and then reference your guide block off of it. So let me grab one to show you. So say you've drilled your 5 holes, and then you want to continue to drill even more in a row. You can drop that guide pin into it. That's the wrong size. This one. You can drop that pin into it, slide it over, drop it into a previously made hole, and now you have 4 more that you can drill that are perfectly spaced off of the original 5. Hope that makes sense. There's also little pins here like this one. This one you put a rod through, and then you can use a set screw to set a distance on that rod. And then you can drop this little end into a previously drilled hole and move your jig down off to the end of the rod and repeat that. And that's how you can space out your dowel joinery more widely. And I have those for each of these sizes as well. Another thing that it comes with are lots of spacers. So you may have noticed that I have one in this jig right now. This spacer allows me to move or distance my dowel joinery from the face of the fence to wherever I need it. So I can just drop different thickness spacers in there in order to achieve that. So there it is without the spacer. Oh, and one thing that is different about this compared to my old jig is these big knurled brass nuts. These are awesome. These spin really fast and smooth. I mean, the whole thing just works like jewelry. And the surface area, of course, is larger as well, where it meets up to the fence, and that adds an additional amount of stiffness to the clamping of the jig. So that's just awesome. And so I have spacers of different thicknesses here. Some of them are nice and thin like that. I have big fat ones like the one I just showed you. But some of them actually even mount to the face of the fence itself. So you can see this one's drilled, and there are little screws that come with it that allow you to mount it right to the face of the fence right there. So between the two of them, spacers on the face of the fence or between the fence and the drill block will allow you to get that dowel joinery spaced out to whatever distance you need it. Of course, there are many ways to configure this via the standard setup, but there are also attachments like this one here. This one's a right angle attachment for doing face drilling. So if you're in the face of a big board and you can't really clamp it using those little screw clamps, you can just clamp this to the face of a board, and that allows you to do dowel joints right in the middle of a board like that. So that's what that one does. And then elsewhere in here I have miter angles. So you can do 45-degree miter with these two pieces here. And I'll put a picture up on screen showing how that configures. So that's super cool. And then speaking of super cool, check this out. So this is a drill depth guide for the 3/8 inch drill bits. So in the face of this here, there's markings for 1 inch, 7/8, 3/4, and 5/8. And you just drop your drill bit in there. Of course, you loosen your stop collar first. Let the drill bit bottom out on the screw that you've just adjusted here. Then you can tighten your collar, and you have a perfectly set depth on that drill bit using this little drill depth guide. So that thing is real nice, big polished block of aluminum here. So those are all the pieces that my dowel system comes with, including some redundant bits like these extra brass rods. I have extra Allen wrenches, and I also have an extra brass knurled nut or two. There's two of them here, which is really nice actually, because you might be in here spinning this and accidentally spin it off the end of the rod. It could roll off across the floor underneath a bench somewhere, and you're thinking, man, now I gotta get on the floor and go look for that. Or you can just grab the extra one, stick it on there, and keep working. So it's nice that I ended up with that stuff too. Also included, of course, is lots of documentation for how to use your DowelMax. So you have kind of a standard manual here, both in English and in Francois, and there's all kinds of detailed instructions in here with little diagrams for how to use it in different configurations. If you're not much of a reader, there is a different version here that's just more of a pictorial version showing the different configurations and how you might use them, which is great. And then if that's not enough for you, there's even a DVD in here. You can kick it old school and pop this in, and there's all kinds of videos on here that show how to use it just in action, so to speak. And there's all kinds of tips and tricks and recommendations included with it. So pretty complete setup if you were to order the whole kit and caboodle. One thing I noticed that they included with this pictorial manual is on the back of it, they have a description of a test that they did. So they created a bunch of different joints like a mortise and tenon, a domino joint, a biscuit joint, pocket hole joints, and of course dowel joints as well, done with their jig. And then they torture test them. So they would create a right angle joint and they would apply pressure to it until it broke, and then they would take a reading off of that of how many pounds per square inch or whatever it took to break the joint. So if I can find those videos, I think they're on YouTube as well. I'll put a little link in the description so you can kind of see it if you're at all curious. But my takeaway from that is that not necessarily that traditional joints like mortise and tenon and dowels and whatnot are like that one is way better than the other. Of course, in their test, the dowel joinery could handle the most torture, so to speak. My takeaway was that any of these traditional joinery methods is wicked strong, like way stronger than most people realize. So unless you're building a wooden suspension bridge or something like that, you really don't have to worry that your joinery is not going to hold. Any of those methods are going to be wicked strong. But at least in this test, for what it's worth, the mortise and tenon that they did could handle upward of 600 pounds per square inch. And dowel joint, like a 3/8 inch dowel with 5 of these. So if you're doing a right angle joint with 5 of these dowels in it, which is about a 3.5 inch wide, like a table apron to a leg, that can handle upwards of 800 pounds per square inch, almost 900. That's nuts. And myself, I've built some joints in the past with the dowel jig that I then tried to destroy, and my God, did it ever take a lot of effort. So I wouldn't worry about the strength of your joinery as long as you're doing joinery the way I described in my previous video, which is to use appropriate sized holes that are properly located and use right-sized dowels in those holes. You're going to end up with a pretty strong joint. I think is the long and the short of it. So I'll include those videos if I can find them in the description. In the meantime, I have some doors that I'm making. They're not traditional frame and panel doors. They're a little different than that because it's kind of a contemporary design I'm working on. I have some plywood panels I need to put some wide walnut edging around. And I think the DowelMax is the best way to do that, because one thing about this that I like compared to my domino joiner is that I'm clamping this into whatever workpiece that I'm working on. Whereas with my dowel joiner, I'm always kind of holding it with my own hand pressure, and there's always a possibility of me introducing a little bit of wiggle or not quite holding it perfectly square, that kind of thing. I need these walnut strips to line up perfectly flush to one side of my plywood panels. And the way that I know I can do that with accuracy is with a jig that actually clamps to the workpiece like this one does. So I'm going to bring that material over here and show you how I go about doing that kind of thing. Okay, so now I'm going to put this thing to use, adding some wide walnut edging to these plywood door panels. And what I want to happen here is for the back side of these pieces of walnut edging to be flush to the back face of these panels. That's super important. So we'll leave a little bit of a lip here that helps protect the edge of this paper veneer that I've already put on these panels. So that's what I'm going to be doing. And the dowels I'm going to be using for that are these 1.5 inch ones, because I don't really need a super long dowel for this purposes. It's really more for alignment than it is for strength in this case. So I'm using the 1.5 inch ones. And as such, I'm going to be putting more of the dowel into the door panel than I am into the edging, because I might want to cut a profile into this edge here for kind of like a finger pull or something like that. So I don't want to be routing that out and accidentally hit the end of a dowel and expose it. So what I'm going to be doing is putting about 7/8 into the panel and about 5/8 into the edging. And to do that, I used the handy dandy depth guide that they provided. So I did one to 7/8 and one to 5/8. And then I double checked them by seeing how much this edge projects out the bottom of the drill guide block. And it does check out, so that works quite precisely. One thing I did notice, and that it is a quibble of mine so far, is that this wrench fits into these collars, which have 2 little set screws in them. These set screws are great because there's 2 of them, so you're kind of hitting it from both sides, and I've never had one of these slip that I tightened correctly. So you find, you try to get away from the fluting where you're tightening it down and then tighten down both sides. But the wrench fits in there all kinds of wiggly, and I don't like that at all. I think that's kind of stinky. But that said, so far everything else has been awesome. So let's go ahead and drill into this. Now what I want to do is make sure that I'm lining everything up correctly. So I have this piece of walnut edging kind of the way I want it to be on the piece. And the part that I want to line up flush, like I said, is this back side here. So in order to make sure I am keeping the jig oriented correctly is to put a little tick mark on this corner here. So I'll put a little X with a pencil, and then I'm going to put a tick mark on the mating side in the same exact spot. So I'm going to flip this over, put a little X right there as well. All right, so XX, X marks the spot, just like that. You'll notice on the jig that there's a little check mark that's kind of machined into the side of the block. That's supposed to be adjacent to the fence. And that is the part that you align with your tick mark, like that. So if I do that correctly on both sides of this joint, this side of the joint is going to end up perfectly flush. And yes, it is that accurate. So then what I'm going to do, or I've already have done actually, is take this spacer rod. So this has a 3/8 end on it. What I'm going to do is drill into the center hole here, plop that into it on the actual workpiece, not the jig, and that'll allow me to space it to where I'm going to tighten it down again down here, and so on and so forth until I get to the end of my board. Now I've already fiddled with it, so I end up down here at the end of the board pretty closely, so they're nice and evenly spaced along the edge of the board. That's what this little guy is for. And so you don't get confused as to which end is which, they machined a little groove right here. So that's the one that you're referencing off of, not the one that doesn't have the groove. So that's a nice little touch that they added to keep you from screwing up and reversing this. So slide this down. Oh, you know what? I need to double check. Now that I have two drill bits, I have to check and see which one is the deeper of the two. I think that one was the 7/8. Yeah, it was. All right, so I want to go deeper into this face of the joint. So I'll put that one in my drill right now. Okay. This lines up to the back side of the workpiece where my little X is. I'm going to line this up flush to the edge of the block. That's super important. Just like that. Oh, I just noticed that this has some wiggle to it. I'm going to make sure that's tight. Same thing here and here. All right, all that stuff's tight. Good. Now I can tighten this down. And in this case, I'm going to drill into this middle hole. I don't want to be too close to the end because I'm going to have another piece of walnut trim coming over the top of it and drilling into that side. So I'm going to drill into that middle hole there. Not only am I drilling into plywood, but that bit is brand new and very, very sharp. So that popped right in there like nothing. Now you want to make sure that you end up with drilling waste underneath your jig, because that can kind of prop it up a little bit and cause you to drill in a little bit of an angle. So I always blow the dust off my workpieces all the time. In fact, you've probably noticed me doing that in pretty much all of my videos. Now I'll drop this pin in here with the grooved reference end lined up with the workpiece, and I'll just slide this until it touches it, tighten it down again, and drill in the middle. And rinse and repeat. So that's one side of my joint, right there. Now I want to do the same thing on the mating piece, which means I need to switch drill bits. So drop this one out of here, put this one in, which is the 5/8. That little X is, because I flipped it over, is on this side. So I need to put my check mark to that side, like that. See that? Check mark, check mark. Lined up flush to the end. By the way, I'm going to be cleaning these ends up. You can see this is actually rough sawn from my handsaw. I'll go over that with the hand plane later and kind of plane it flush. So I got that on there good. I switched my drill bits, and I'm going to start in the middle, just like I did with this one, and use my rod to move down to the end of the piece. I like to clear the fluting of the drill bit from once in a while, so it drills a little more easily and a little more smoothly. Last one. Now, of course, you want to turn your workpiece over and dump out any shavings that have ended up in the bottoms of those holes. Another thing sometimes you'll see people do is chamfer the edges of your drill holes. So you can put a chamfering bit into your drill and just kind of soften those edges a little bit. The reason you might want to do that is when you drop a dowel into there and the glue squeezes out, it can kind of squeeze out into that little recess instead of causing glue squeeze out on the edges of your workpiece. That's something you might want to do as well, but right now I just want to see how it ended up lining up. So I'm going to put some dowels in. These dowels fit just perfectly snug. You can see they got the fluting to help prevent that kind of hydraulic lock you can get when you drop the glue in there. I'm going to line up X to X like that and put it on, and there you have it right there. Nice and flush all the way across the back, a little bit of a lip on the face, just a bit, and we're off and running. And while I'm at it, I may as well glue this up and show you a couple things about that. So I'm using some liquid hide glue. I generally prefer that for almost everything except maybe cutting boards, just on account of the fact that it's reversible. It stays nice and slippery when you're trying to draw the joint together, and it has a little bit longer open time, especially if you warm it up like I just did. So even though my shop is pretty cool, I stick this thing in a baby bottle warmer, warm it up a little bit, and it's ready to go. I've already made little chamfers on the edges of all these holes, and I'm going to show you how I go about applying the glue to these holes as well. There's a little sleight of hand trick I like to do for that. I'm actually almost out of glue. I'm going to have to go buy some more, but here we go. So I really don't want any squeeze out, so I'm going to kind of err on the side of a little bit less glue, if it would come out of there. There we go. So what I like to do is draw it around the edge of the hole like that and let it drop in. That allows it to coat all sides of the hole. I don't know if you can see that's what I'm doing, but I basically touch the glue to the edge of the hole and let that surface tension kind of stick it to the hole there like that. Hope that makes sense. Hope you could see that okay. Then I'll drop my dowels in there, and as I drop the dowel in, I actually twist them. Give it a little extra twist once it's seated, and that also helps spread the glue around a little bit more. And sometimes your dowel fits pretty tight. That's why I like to keep a little hammer handy. There could probably be a little bit more glue in here, but like I said earlier, this isn't for the sake of strength so much as it is for alignment. And again, I also don't want any squeeze out on this at all because I just can't afford it. It'd be super hard to clean up on the edge of that paper veneer that I have here. And now I'm going to go to the mating edge, and I'm also going to drop a little bit of glue in those holes as well. But I've already put glue on the face of this. And I already have my clamp set up on the other bench there. So once I have this pushed together, I can walk over there, drop it onto the clamps, and tighten it up. Again, X marks the spot, X marks the spot, made them up to each other. And press it into place. Looking good. So that concludes my follow-up to my previous video about dowel joinery and the DowelMax jig specifically. As you can see, they've made all kinds of changes to it that make it a little bit more stout, make it a little bit more versatile, but it's always been a precise jig. It's always been bomb-proof. You know, it's quite small. You don't have to dedicate a lot of shop space to it. And compared to the other alternatives in the joinery universe, it's relatively inexpensive. So there's a lot to be said for it. And other than the little Allen wrench fitting kind of loosely in the drill collars, everything else about it works like jewelry. So although it's weird for me to talk about a tool that was sent to me free of charge, I've used the DowelMax jig for freaking ever, man. And I've done all kinds of joinery and furniture work with it. I've always been happy with it. So it's not like I have to compromise my principles in order to talk about it. So I hope you got something out of this video, and we'll catch you in the next one. Now, if you like what you saw here, please hit like and subscribe. It would help me out a lot. Also hit the little bell icon if you want to be notified anytime I release a new video. And if you didn't like what you saw here, keep it to yourself, pal. Or watch one of my other videos. You might like one of those. Thank you for watching.